to Mac Gamecast episode 4. I'm John Carr here with the fantastic Ted. How you doing, Ted?
Doing good.
The wonderful Casper. How you doing?
Good, thank you very much.
And awesome. And the star of our show, it's Chris. How are you, sir?
I am excellent. Happy to be here.
Thank you for coming on. Yeah, so basically we're going to talk about in this episode all about Chris here, an indie Mac game dev, has a cool little zombie game on Steam called Don't Get Bit. So we're here to talk about it and how we started it and how we got there and what it's like to release a game on Steam and all those sorts of interesting questions. I think I may be the only... Casper, did you play the game? I know you checked it out a bit.
I looked at some YouTube videos of it and I looked over the Steam page and stuff like that. But
Right.
I haven't actually played it myself yet.
Right. I did play through the whole thing in, I think, April, or maybe it was January. It was earlier this year, in any case. Very fun, tactical puzzle zombie game. Don't get bit. Go check it out. Chris, so how did you, maybe you can talk to us a little bit about your process. Like where did Don't Get Bit begin? Did you always have an aspiration for it? Was it like a flash in the pan? How did that get started?
Yeah, so I've always loved video games. I've played my entire life, and in the back of my head has always been, I would love to make a video game someday. I've done a little coding here or there, nothing for games, more business kind of stuff. I'm a filmmaker by trade, and it's just always been that bucket list thing that I would like to do at some point. And when the pandemic happened, I run a film school. We had to shut down the film school for 4 months.
Ooh.
And I'm someone who loves to be creative. I always feel unhappy if I don't have some creative iron in the fire. And at first I thought, well, I'll start a new screenplay. I'll start a new film project. But I was so sort of depressed about the fact that the film school was closed that I didn't want to do anything film related. And I thought, this might be the perfect time to do this game that I've always wanted to do. And I thought, yeah, I can bang out a game in a few months. And it ended up being way more complicated than I thought. It was an awesome adventure, but that was the inspiration. I've always wanted to do it. And then there was just this opportunity because of the pandemic to take advantage of it. Yeah.
Nice.
It's actually kind of a fun thing because I think to a lot of people the pandemic have been, obviously a downer, but you had that view of it as an opportunity as well. That's pretty cool.
And it was when you film, you obviously have to be able to get together with people to film. Our team for Don't Get Bit ended up consisting of 8 people on the development team and 6 playtesters. So there were 14 of us in total, and there was never a moment when we got together. There was never a moment when it was like, it was always like a Discord session or a lot of one-on-one phone calls or texting and tons of emails. But a game is something that you can create long distance. I mean, our composer's in California, our lead programmer was in Minnesota. Our graphic artist was in Pennsylvania. I'm in New Jersey. Our actress is from California. So it was really cool to bring all those people together who were also in the middle of a pandemic going, I want to make something. Let's not let this time just suck.
Everybody
Nice.
making the best of a situation.
That's really cool. That's a really true remote indie dev. That's pretty nice. I was particularly, I enjoyed the game for its combat puzzle. I love combat puzzles, and I like zombies, and it's a zombie combat puzzle. It's great. I really found the artwork striking as well, and the voice acting was really good. So you may have had a smallish team, but it was a mighty output, I would say.
Thanks.
You...
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, my original vision for the game was bigger, and then you very quickly realize why. Like I love a game like XCOM, like that's amazing, but you realize that that's a game with a multi-million-dollar budget and over 100 people working on it, and
Right.
these things are like featured-length films that are being produced. And so when you start really looking at like indie games, obviously the teams are much smaller, but you have to figure out, well, what can we do at the size that we're at. With of the 8 people on our team, 7 of us had never done anything with a video game before.
Okay, all right.
And so, there's things that, so I'm a filmmaker, so I know how to find actors, right? And we auditioned 300 actresses over 2 days. Sent in voice samples to find the actress, right? So I know I can get a good actor.
Wow.
We had a very talented graphic artist that I know, but she's one person, so she can draw beautiful 2D art, but she's not going to be able to do, amazing 3D graphics, and we're not going to be able to pull that off. And so so early on we're like, well, what if our main character goes through this world with a sketchbook and she draws sort of like the zombies that she's coming in contact with, and so we'll let our graphic artist's art be the art of the main character, right? And so you try to figure out ways to keep the fact that we're indie and we can only do so many things, still feel like it makes sense in the video game world that we're creating.
That's really cool. Yeah, my question was going to be, you answered it without me asking. Yeah, how did you go about finding like the actor or actresses or some of the, the talent on your team, basically. So that's interesting to hear. No, I really want to shout that out. The artwork, it really is very high quality. It's very eye-catching, and it's immersive in the theme for sure. So props to that.
Yeah, so that is my daughter's roommate at college, and she's just graduated, Katie Grubb, and she's a graphic artist, crazy talented. And I always knew she was a talented artist, but she'd never drawn a zombie in her life. And so it kind of had that panic of like, can you draw the undead? And she totally could, and it was creepy and gross and awesome. And I remember the first time she sent me a picture and I got goosebumps. It was really cool. Yeah.
Nice. Talking about that starting process, you mentioned you had to basically align your ambitions with the capabilities of your team. So I'm curious, like, how much bigger of a game did you have in mind? If, like, in the, what if type of world?
Yeah, so my original vision was, for the most part, similar. I mean, I knew it was going to be 30 levels from the beginning. I knew that, like, kind of the story was the story that I wanted to tell. But I imagined it being more, you're going to find weapons along the way, and you're going to have attributes, and you're going to customize your characters, and you can sort of create the characters that you want as you go through on this journey. And I still think that's a cool idea, but what we discovered very early on was, if you're trying to design levels that challenge people who are both maybe beginners and have played for a while, you need to have everything sort of planned out, because if you let people design their characters, people could essentially design characters that can't win. Do you know what I mean? Like, you could put yourself in a situation where you either can't defeat the zombie horde that's about to come at you, or you could put yourself in a situation where you're so powerful that you're just racing through levels and it's no problem.
Right.
And we didn't want any randomness in our game. So our game has literally nothing goes to luck.
Right.
So I think you used the word puzzle, which is absolutely correct. Our game is basically 30 puzzles in a turn-based zombie world. So we had to kind of ratchet back what we were going to do programmatically. Also, I thought this was going to take us, 4 or 5 months to do, which was ridiculous in hindsight, and we managed to do it in 10 months. I think if we'd added all those other things, we'd be looking at years. So.
Right. That's very interesting. That's a really impressive time frame, I'd say. I mean, like you said, the game is 30 levels, and there's this art, and there's bits of music, and there's voiceovers, and of course, you mentioned playtesters. So how was balancing this game, like, across those 30 levels? What was that like?
So it was that was especially hard. I would say that the level design and playtesting was the hardest part of making the game. For a couple of reasons. So one, there are 30 levels, but you can actually play our game 3 different times. So we call it the first journey, the second journey, and the third journey. And if you play it through the second and third journey, you get different endings. On the second journey, the rules change. So now you have a limited number of turns to complete each level. And then on the third journey, your characters can no longer take hits. If they get bit, that the game's over. You have to restart that level. So not only did we have to make sure the levels worked for the first journey, but that same level design had to work for the second and third journey. So when we got our play testers, I got 6 very different people. So there's, you got people in their 20s, and you got older players who are, 50, and you've got people who, there were 2 people who were sort of experts at turn-based games. So we had 2 people who had never played a turn-based game. And then we had them play the game and fill out sort of forms that said, level 1 took me 5 minutes and 3 attempts. Level 2 took me 20 minutes and 5 attempts. Level 3, I finished it the first time. And what was kind of fascinating was people would say to me, oh, level 9, it's too hard. You got to make that level easier. And then the other playtester would say, level 9, too easy. I went right through it. And I mean, that happened over and over again. So we started to look for patterns. Like if there was a level where, 4 of the 6 testers said too hard or too easy, then we would try to adjust the difficulty. But more often than not, we would eventually get it right. And getting it right means, 2 people say it's too hard, 2 people say it's too easy, and 2 people say it's just right. And that's, that's what happens when you play a good game, I think, is that sometimes some levels you're like, oh, I got it the first time. That's cool. And then the next level you're like, I can't figure this out. And, you have to come back to it. And that's okay, too.
Yeah, I definitely experienced that. I can't recall on which levels, but a couple they just clicked and I kind of breezed through them, and the others I just had to play over and over and over, but it was a fun challenge. And every time you get a little bit further in that challenge, especially some of the later levels when there's multiple zombie types, and there's some very clever levels, very clever level design in the game that's quite fun, I must say.
Thank you. I think one of the biggest motivations for me for doing this game and not just sort of copying other games was I like the idea of a game that if I go back to a level and I try it again, it's sort of exactly the same, and I can try and like rethink and retry my strategy. So XCOM is one of my all-time favorite games, and so I'm not knocking XCOM, but if you replay a level, it's never going to be exactly the same. And so if I'm struggling with a level and I talk to my friend on the phone, they can't replicate what I'm going through.
Right.
But with Don't Get Bit, you can 100% go, I can't get past this. What are you doing? How are you making it work? Yeah.
I like that. That's an interesting. I feel like more games used to have that. It was more like sameness, I guess, and now it's all about lots of luck and randomness and all kinds of things and all kinds of games. So that's an interesting aspect I didn't think about.
Yeah, I had a few people have mentioned to me that our game is probably, and to be clear, if anyone, to whoever's listening, our game is definitely an indie game. It's a small game. It'll probably take you 3 hours to, roughly to maybe do that first journey, and then another, 2 to 3 hours to do the second, and then the third. But I've been told by a few people that our game is probably good for people who haven't maybe played a lot of turn-based games and want to start experiencing it. Because in some of the other bigger turn-based games, there's so much to keep track of, and you are trying to figure out like how to build out skill trees and what you should be collecting and how you should be prioritizing, and that's all really great if you want that kind of, hey, it took me 3 hours to get through one XCOM level kind of thing. But we're not that, and that's cool too, right? Like, so I think we're a good place for people to start to experience that.
I can see that. I definitely agree with that. I'm not like a turn-based expert, though I play a fair amount of them. In terms of like XCOM and Fallouts, mostly the old Fallouts 1 and 2 and stuff like that. I can definitely see that. I would definitely recommend this to someone dipping their toes in like turn-based combat, or turn-based sort of strategy game.
Yeah.
Or especially if they like a bit of zombie stuff, which almost everybody does. That's a very easy recommendation as well. Doesn't break the bank. I think it's $10 as well.
It is really
easy pickup.
Yeah, and Steam just had their summer sale, and so obviously I'm sure everyone's aware, games on Steam go on sale, and so we participated in that. And so if $10 feels too steep, then just wait for the next sale.
Wish list it. It'll show up.
Yeah. It's crazy how many people. It's funny, like when our game went on sale, at first when we first launched it, we still haven't sold a ton of copies, and that's okay. But a ton of people put our game on the wish list, and for a moment it was kind of frustrating. But then I realized that's exactly what me and my daughter do. Like, we put our games on wish lists, and we wait for the sale to come along, and then we buy the games. And so the sale just happened, and sure enough, we sold another bunch of games.
Nice.
And so that's cool. I'm happy with people waiting for sales. Yeah.
Yeah, we could probably spend an episode talking just about that specifically, especially the way perhaps you could say storefronts facilitate that, like Epic and Steam, and whether that's a good thing or not, in terms of the developer versus player kind of relationship. That's interesting. But it's nice to know some more people got your game. That's good. They should.
Yeah, and it's just, this was never meant to be I'm going to make a lot of money doing this. This was meant to be, let's have some fun during a pandemic. And just the idea that there's people out there that I don't know that are playing a game that I made and enjoying it and, leaving lovely comments, reviews for us is just really satisfying. So I don't, it's already hit everything I wanted it to do. Like, awesome.
Oh, that's very nice to hear. Yeah, I was. You mentioned, I believe, you made this game on a Mac. Is that correct?
Yeah. So, not necessarily. I have a Mac. I live in a Mac universe, and it just turned out that every single other person on the team, I know a lot of creative people, and creative people tend to go towards Macs. Not that you can't be creative on a PC, but every single person who worked on the game, and the 8 development people were all Mac people. Some of our playtesters were PC, and that was on purpose because we wanted people to be able to make sure it worked on PC as well too.
Right.
But yeah, so the graphic artist is working in Photoshop on a Mac and with a tablet, and our composers doing the music, and court and I don't know all the proper terms, but kind of like recording it with instruments, but then doing all the mixing on a Mac, and our lead programmer's coding on a Mac. I'm doing my coding on a Mac and the level design on a Mac. The game's a Unity game, which if any gamer out there has played indie games, that most of them are done in the Unity engine. And it's honestly, there's so many tutorials. It's fairly easy to learn. And what's really cool is, anytime you program on Unity, there's an option when you're done to say make this work for Mac, make this work for PC, and then it exports both games, and it pretty much worked like that. So it's kind of frustrating to me sometimes when I see some people will actually go to the trouble of making a game in Unity. They'll release it for PC, and they won't release it for Mac simply because they don't have a Mac to test it on, I guess, and it makes them uncomfortable. But it's literally a checkbox and sort of like an extra export.
Right. That's interesting. I haven't run into that too recently, but back there was a time I did gaming journalism as a main job. And I ran into that a few times because I would pursue this, or they would say, I saw a game, looked interesting, it'd be more out and about on trying to hunt down games so I could, talk about them or interview them or whatever. And I did run into that, hey, is your game coming to Mac? This looks really cool. I'd love to, play it, or I know people who love to play it. And sometimes, that would be an answer. I'd like to do it, but I don't have the Mac to test it on. I can't remember the game, but some guy did it, and he tested it somehow through some weird virtual environment on a Mac, virtualizing a Mac and testing it. He went through the extra effort.
Yeah.
I was able to play test one. I can't remember the names now. I'm bad with names. 1 or 2 small games or whatever, along with maybe some other people, but trying to as well. I'll play test your game, or I'll bug text it or whatever. Does it launch on Mac? Yes, it does. Yay! Let's go.
Yeah. Yeah. So we didn't run into any issues, and honestly, if I were to do another one, and I could imagine doing another game one day, especially because there's a lot I've learned on this journey. Working on a Mac was absolutely no problem. So
nice.
I just wish there were, and this is obviously a different topic, I just wish there were more games for Mac. I wish there were more, sort of AAA releases coming out for Mac. But
absolutely. I mean, it's related, you want to see more games for Mac, you make one yourself. I think that's really cool. That's very laudable. I admire that a lot. It doesn't matter if it's an indie game or AAA game or whatever. You've contributed to Mac gaming and gaming in general, but also Mac gaming, and I think that's super awesome. A lot of respect for that. and your game's very fun for a zombie puzzler. So that's also awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah, we've talked a bit about that on the show before. We're not going to pivot hard into that, but like, we're in an interesting time. Apple's changing a lot of hardware, and our general optimism among the team here on the show is that like we're in a bit of a down period for sure, but very interesting things seem to be just around the corner. We hope. Obviously, we don't know. We're not prophets, but
Yeah. No, I hope so. And but I'm definitely encouraged by the quality of the indie games I see out there. So now that I have a game, I'm much more aware of other indie gamers, and I've joined other groups for indie gamers. And I didn't realize how rich the indie community was, and that I mean, there's definitely been some moments where I've been like, our game is so small compared to these other like even like bigger, more amazing indie games. People are doing crazy cool things. I was playing Pedestrian the other day. I don't know if you've ever played that, and it's basically made by these two brothers, and the game is phenomenal. And I had an issue trying to use my controller with it at one point, and so there was an option to email if you had a question, and they got back to me in like 10 minutes. It was crazy,
oh wow.
like just the level of support and the passion they had for their game and for the community playing it. And so I am very proud to be part of that indie game developer community.
Funny you mentioned that story because I've actually had pretty much the exact same experience with the developer of Tacoma,
Mhm.
where I sent them an email about controller support, and the day after they said, "Oh, there's a beta on Steam. Try that one and see if it fixed it," and it fixed. So yeah, there's definitely good support in that space.
Yeah, I mean, obviously,
Something.
sometimes with some of the big games, there's no one to reach out to, and sometimes it feels like, if you do have a bug, you're just, spending an hour searching on Google. Did someone else have it, and have they found a solution? But with the indie games, oftentimes you really can reach out to the programmer and the team, and figure out how they did it. I was playing Blood Will Be Spilled the other day, and which is a really great turn-based indie game. And the lead actor for that is the same actor from Deus Ex, which
Oh,
is kind of trippy because you got this like multi-million-dollar AAA game and this deep Clint Eastwood sounding lead actor, and he's the same guy who's appearing in this little indie game. And
yeah, it's
so I
neat.
think there is a lot of support for indie games in ways that sometimes people don't realize. Like there's, whether it's composers who work in both or actors, which is really cool.
Yeah, I'm not pronouncing this correctly. I'm sure Elias Tophesis or something. Yeah, the guy who plays Adam Jensen.
Yeah, him.
Yeah, such a unique, gravelly sort of voice.
Absolutely.
I'm a huge fan. So that's really
And here
cool.
he
I'm
is
gonna
like
have to check that out.
this Matrix character in Deus Ex, and then he's like this mosquito cowboy in Blood Will Be Spilled, which is hysterical. Yeah, I love it.
That is funny. You
Yeah.
mentioned Pedestrian. I haven't played it, but I know what it is. I covered it, quote unquote, in a new Mac games video with Mr. MacRate.
Yeah.
Could have been last year or this year. I don't remember when it came out. So that's why I'm aware of it. Also very cool indie puzzle game where you're going through like construction sites and basements and all these places with signs, and you have to manipulate like with a stick figure, right? And
Yeah, you
manipulate the
play as the stick
environment.
figures. Yeah,
Yeah,
you are the stick figures in the signs trying to get from place to place.
yeah. Visually, it's super cool. I didn't know it was just
Yeah.
made by like two guys or brothers. That's really neat.
Yeah.
And Casper is mentioning Tacoma. I believe that's Fulbright Studios, if I'm not mistaken. I feel that way as well. I don't know. Yeah, let's just say XCOM because we're talking about it. In the game is a big community around it, but if you want to it doesn't feel accessible. Big teams don't feel accessible, basically, largely because you're often
very
dealing
true.
with a publisher, even or a PR person
Yeah.
rather than like the person who made the game or one of the people who made the game. So that can also be a little frustrating sometimes. Or yeah, they get back to you within a week or
Yeah.
whatever.
Another
It's
game
actually
that was a
interesting.
big inspiration for us was Into the Breach, which is an indie game that I thought was insanely well done, and it was inspiring because you look at their credits and it's I think it's like about half a dozen people who made that game, um, and just the idea that such a great game could be made by just a few people working together was really cool.
I messed around with Into the Breach on, actually, I believe it was released. I got it for free somewhere, honestly. That's why I played
Nice.
it. I might have been the Epic Store, one of their free, their free weeks. Oh, right, it's from the makers of FTL. That's why. Subset Games. I knew I'd remembered something somewhere. Cool art style. Yeah, nifty little turn-based puzzle game as well. Combats, sort of save cities from aliens type thing.
So, going back to Don't Get Bit for a moment, something I've been thinking about is that it's kind of interesting to have the mix of a zombie theme and that's more slow, methodical puzzle turn-based system, where you often see zombie games being these fast-paced shooter action type games. How did that theme and that kind of gameplay style come together?
So two things really. One is I love zombie movies. And so, like I said, I'm a filmmaker first, and the idea of doing a zombie game was really appealing. But then it also was helpful because we're not brilliant programmers. We're beginner programmers, and so zombie logic is easy to program, right? Zombies see brains, try to eat brains. They try to go straight towards brains. Versus if you're trying to do combat with characters who have to think like humans and choose when to defend and when to hide and when to come out and how to work together as a team against you, that's so much more complicated. I know how much time it took us just to get zombies to move, or in a somewhat straight line or around the edge of a car. So the thought of trying to program, humans is sort of terrifying. So those two things really made it seem like a good choice. Love zombie stories, zombie movies, and coding simplicity. Yeah,
That's cool. Working with within constraints to be creative within it.
yeah. When
yeah.
I teach filmmaking, I always tell my students, you have to learn how to make your limitations work for you, right? So if you don't have a good microphone, then you shoot a silent film or a music video, right? If you don't have lights to work with, then shoot outside and the sun is your light. You work with what you have.
Very clever. I also think it's worth noting, as someone who's played like shooters and strategy are my primary games in general, it's very noticeable when the AI isn't good enough or smart, and it's a common complaint in all kinds of AAA games. Like, the game looks good and the shooting's fun and blah, 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 but the AI isn't very smart, and they're kind of stupid, and because they're meant to mimic humans, and when they're really good, people also notice that, like, wow, this is really good, and they're really cool, and they're really engaging. So I think that's a huge step, like a big gap from this sort of simple, or like monster. You could also play zombie with maybe monsters or whatever. Not exactly, but non-human entities. So when you see a human you're battling, you expect a certain level of behavior, I think, in many games. So
sure.
Tough.
I'm old, and I've been playing games forever, and I love first-person shooters, and I remember Half-Life was a big eye-opening experience for me because I remember playing that game, and at some point you're fighting these military guys, and I throw a grenade at them, and I'm just, it lands behind the box, they're all going to die, and then the guy picks up the grenade and throws it back at me. and I die, but I'm smiling the whole time, like, yeah, I threw the grenade too soon. I had to count to 2 and then throw it so it would explode when it landed. You know what I mean? Like they programmed the AI to be smarter than that. And that cool feeling of, wow, this is a next step up in gaming, right? And a lot of people do that now. Obviously, like, the AI has gotten a lot better in games. But our zombies are dumb.
Well, but it's cool. Let's talk about your game a bit more and make it sound good, because it is good. There is quite a few different zombie types. There's your typical, like, slow shambler zombies. I forget the names, but isn't there like 6 or 7 different ones total?
I think there's 9 zombie types in the game. Yeah, so there's slow zombies and torso zombies that are missing their legs, and fast zombies, and then we have what we call our mutant zombies. And those were really fun to come up with. I mean, we basically had a massive brainstorming session where we kind of listed, 24 different zombies that we could have, and some were getting crazy, like, should zombies fly? Should zombies be gelatinous and you can like move through them? Or, I don't know what we were thinking. But at some point you start trying to come up with your, well, what is the tone of our game? And we wanted each new zombie. So as you basically every 2 or 3 levels, you're coming upon a new zombie type. And we wanted that new zombie type to keep the game interesting, but also start to make you think in a different way. So, for example, early on in the game, you get a weapon and you find a gun and you can use it to shoot zombies. But if you fire the gun, it makes the zombies aware. So now zombies that weren't going to pay any attention to you are now going to be aware of where you are. So do you choose to fire the gun? Well, then we have a zombie called a screamer. And, if the screamer is aware of you, he's going to scream and that's going to do damage. And so now you have to decide, like, am I going to be quiet or am I going to take him out first? And so you're always just trying to make the zombies cool while at the same time making it fun for the gameplay.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that, the ramping up with the zombies, and especially the levels where there were several of them in the same time, because then you're dealing with the runners, who I think could move like 4 spaces and also had high damage. They were really trippy to deal with in hordes, because then there's the slow ones, and there's like a little biter coming up behind you. Then like maybe there's a screamer, or those buggers in the water. They were, oh god, they're frightening. Like the watery tentacle zombies.
Everyone hates those.
Yeah, but in a great way. Like, and there's one level where you're on like little islands and you got to cross water, and there's like screamers and tentacle guys, and that was one of the more challenging ones. That took me a lot of tries, 5 or 10 tries or something to get by that one. But I really enjoyed it. It wasn't frustrating. It was fun.
Oh, good. I'm glad you stuck with it. I had a friend who basically texted me like, I'm on level 24. I hate you. That kind of like, this is just too hard. And so hopefully people don't give up. We actually ended up adding, one of the last things we added to the game was a skip option. So you can go into the settings and you can turn on skip. And so if there's just a level that's making you miserable, you can press a skip button and jump to the next level, because we didn't want people to stop playing because the level just ruined it for them. I mean, hopefully people don't do that and they take the time to kind of figure it out, because obviously they all can be completed. But that skip option is there for people who are like, tentacle zombies, no thank you.
That makes sense. I didn't actually know that was there, but that's a solid feature, or maybe I just forgot.
There's also there's a hidden menu, which I can tell anyone who's listening. On the main menu of the game, there's our logo, Don't Get Bit, and there's a little hex above the eye, which is part of our logo. And if you click on the hex, you can jump to any level in any journey.
Ooh.
So if you're just like, if you just are like, I want to get to level 27 on the second journey, or I want to cheat and see the endings for journey 2 and journey 3, you can. I don't think you'll appreciate it as much, but you do have that ability. We actually needed to put it in there because our playtesters needed a way to be able to jump to levels. And if our playtesters said, hey, level 17's not working, I needed a quick way to be able to jump to level 17 and try it. So we left it in. I don't think anyone stumbled on it. Like, no one's told me that they have. But it's there if people want to just jump around.
I'm going to have to check that out after. That's cool. That makes sense. It reminds me a bit of like old Marathon Bungie stuff. I think you could shift or control click on a certain menu and you could actually level jump anywhere.
Yeah.
Which was fun. Kind of a thing like you want to play the game at least once, but like I would definitely go back and play some of the Don't Get Bit levels. Several of them were like standouts for me. I don't remember their names, but I'd jump around and go, aha, this is the one. I think there was one where, I'm terrible with the names, but there was a huge horde in front of you, and I think you had to travel down and to the right across a little bridge or something, or get on a boat maybe. That one was so intense, even just visually, because suddenly there's just hordes of zombies all over the screen, and they're right in front of you, and you have to balance, the running, and there's maybe some cars to kind of try and block with, and
we tried to mix it up so it just felt, different, and it was just like little bite-sized chunks. I mean, I think 2 things I've discovered with our game is that I think it has a very small audience, which is okay. That for people who are into a indie, turn-based game, that's not everyone. I had a few friends who bought the game and they thought they were going to be running around slashing and shooting zombies every few seconds. I was like, it's just not that game. I'm sorry. Um, but the people who do like that kind of game really do seem to dig it. And so far, I really should knock on wood, but so far every single review we've had on Steam has been a thumbs up, and really appreciate that. So
Nice.
at least the people who are finding us seem to really like it.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see that. May not have the widest appeal, but it does what it does very well. And for the kind of gamer who enjoys that, it's an easy thumbs up for sure. I did leave a review. I even had a critique or two, but it was an easy thumbs up, and I really enjoyed my time with the game. Um, if anything, I actually wanted more from the game, which is kind of one of my critiques, I think,
Yeah,
was
yeah.
like, oh, I would have actually enjoyed more story, but how much, how much can you do? But I found it interesting enough to critique because I actually wanted more. That was where that critique came from. Like I
Cool.
wanted to see more from these because let's talk about the characters a bit. You don't just have one character. Minor spoiler alert. You come across other companions and maybe a pet and this and that. So you get to control multiple characters with different stats, different weapons, and they're added to the puzzle of all the zombies as well. And of course, they have some narrative there. So it is.
Yeah,
You've created a fun little world for
we
sure.
I knew that I knew that I wanted four characters. I knew that um, I wanted the party to grow over time, and I knew that I wanted to tell a story through a series of monologues. And once I quickly realized that our main character was going to be this 18-year-old girl, Cassie, um, I'm a writer, but I wanted the 18-year-old voice to feel more authentic. So I turned to my 21-year-old daughter and was like, she's also a writer, and I was like, can you write these? Like, let's come up with a story together. Like, this is the arc that we're going to go on. This is the journey, but will you write these monologues? And she was kind enough to do it and put up with all my critiques. And it was a really cool, like, father-daughter experience building this video game together because she's
Oh
also a
wow.
gamer. And she had some rules, that she wasn't going to do. She's like, none of these people are going to fall in love, and she's all these like tropes and things that she wanted to avoid, and she's like, there's this character, female character, Sarge, who's pretty kick-ass, and she's like, she's not going to have some kid that died in the apocalypse, and she's pining for this kid. I've seen that too many times, and so she was really adamant about who these characters were and who they should be, and yeah, so it was really cool working with her.
That is very
So
cool. And oh, go ahead, Casper, please.
I was just gonna say, so did you write the you two write the story as you were making the game, like in parallel with doing level design and all the other stuff, or was the story something you prepared in advance and then developed,
So
or how did that work?
that's a great question. So I had a basic premise for the story, with not a lot of details. Just the idea that it was going to take place in New Jersey because that's where we live. And in southern Jersey, there's this area called the Pine Barrens, which is this massive wooded area that basically goes across the state, roughly from Philadelphia to the coast. And we wanted our character to be on this journey. And so we just started sort of brainstorming together, like, where would they go, what would happen, and we wanted the game to feel as logical as a zombie game feels, right? So, um, why is she going into the Pine Barrens? Well, she's trying to get to her uncle's house, and um, and then who's she going to meet along the way, and what's going to change her. I don't want to give away things because there are some twists that I think are cool.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but why is she doing this, and who are these people that she's meeting along the way? And we talked about things like, should other characters talk besides Cassie? Should we does everyone survive, does everyone not? And you debate all of that kind of stuff, and then you finally come up with a story that matches the gameplay, but hopefully also, as we've heard from a bunch of people, each level starts with a monologue from the main, from Cassie. You hear Cassie's voice every single time, and you want that to be something that's enjoyable. This 30 to 60-second long monologue that takes the story forward, but also tells you a little bit about the world that she's in that moment.
Yeah, I was going
So
to comment. No, go ahead.
I was just going to end up with just saying, so yeah, so we came up with it together, brainstormed a lot, changed a lot. Um, occasionally we would say something like, that boy, that was really dark. The next monologue has to have some humor, and then I'd say to my daughter, write something funny, which is a terrible thing to say to someone. But then she would do it. And so, yeah, that was cool.
Nice.
Yeah, I really enjoyed hearing how you mentioned you worked on this with your daughter together. That's super cool. And I definitely felt that. It felt, I mean, I guess I can't, like, if I were to imagine myself as a young girl in the zombie apocalypse, that, like, that feel, those writing, those thoughts, maybe that outlook, again, there's some cynicism, there's some humor, there's some scrappiness there, sort of the youthful zeal, and it comes through as a character, even in these little monologues and even in this short, 3-hour game or so. So
Yeah, when we were,
yeah.
I was just going to say, when we were casting it, so when you're casting for actors, you typically go through Backstage, which is where you find actors, and we posted the monologues, and we said, we're looking for a voice actor. This is once again in the middle of the pandemic, and so a lot of actors looking for work. But we kept getting these actresses saying, "Oh, these monologues are so much fun. Like, who wrote these? Like, they sound like a female. Like, I think too often female characters are written by, men who are not capturing an honest female voice." And so they were just really appreciative. And so that's why, like I said, we were originally going to cast over a week. And within 2 days, over 300 actresses had submitted the monologues for us to listen to. So
Wow.
you imagine us listening to the same monologue from 300 different actresses and trying to decide, who's good, who's great, who's not good at all. And it was a fun challenge.
Yeah, that sounds like quite a list, a spreadsheet to keep track of, a lot of columns.
Yeah, it
Um,
was, well, and we narrowed it down to 10, and then we narrowed it down to 3. And then the actress that we found, Cami Hines, just it was really amazing. Like, now she's, it's at some point the actress becomes the character, and I can't imagine Cassie's voice being anyone else's. And yeah, I'm really pleased with her acting in it.
yeah,
And what
I'm
I've
also
seen of
very
the
impressed.
game, the voice acting really stood out as being absolutely excellent. And those
Thanks.
little narrative snippets at the beginning of each level was really something that made me think that I would want to see more of the game, because you kind of get hooked on it, like, oh, I want to hear the next bit.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
I
if
was thinking, I was going to say, I was thinking the same thing. I was watching some of the videos too, and it's like, maybe I want to try this out.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I hope people do try it out. I mean, in the end, you do have to like, strategy, puzzle, turn-based gaming. But there's definitely a bit of a story there, and it's, like, for example, I love the game Into the Breach, but there's really no story. It's, oh, you're saving the Earth from aliens, kill the aliens, but there's no real narrative. There's a game I play called Dicey Dungeons, which I like a lot, which is a card combat game, and it's super fun. But there's no real. They kind of pretend like there's a story, but there's no real story. So we wanted there to be something that made you care for these characters and root for them, and so I think we did that, but it's up to the player.
It definitely comes through, in my opinion, anyways, someone having played. Same thing, you kind of want to see, oh, you want to get to the next level because it's a new level, new puzzle, new zombies, maybe new character or whatever. And again, new snippet. Yeah, the actress, she deserves more work. I hope she's getting it. She's really
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, she is. I just worked with her again on an actual film. So yeah, she's really good. Yeah.
Fantastic. Interesting. I wanted to ask a little bit about the process with Steam, getting a game on Steam. You've made the game, you have the game, here you go. How do you go about, getting it published on Steam? What's that
Yeah,
like?
it's both straightforward and a pain in the ass. Can I say that? It's
Yeah.
yeah, so it's anyone can do it. It costs $100 to put a game on Steam, and you fill out an insane amount of paperwork. I mean, you're literally giving them like your bank information because they have to be able to pay you every month, your tax information. It's a solid couple of days of just filling out information and getting verified. the amount of information just to create your page and put your images up, it all has to be, every element of it has to be approved by Steam. So it's not a, like I have a couple of friends who have games on itch, and, itch is a much more like, hey, you can throw anything up here that you want, which is very cool. But for me, since I consider myself a Steam gamer, and that's where I primarily go for games, there was something about having my game on Steam that was really important. And so even now there's a pride of like, I have a game on Steam, and the minute our game appeared on Steam, like if you just type the phrase "don't get bit," which is not that weird a phrase, like we're #1 on Google, not because we've sold 50,000 copies, but because it's on Steam. And there's just a sort of a cachet that comes with putting it on Steam. The downside is, Steam takes a lot of the money that comes in. So there's I don't know if people know this, but like Steam handles all of the transactions, which is great. But so they're taking out all of the taxes and all of the overseas. There's like they do all the what's the word I want?
Currency translating.
Yeah, currency translating. Yeah, and there's special taxes in other countries. They take those out, and then after all of that money is gone, then Steam takes their 30%. So in the end, you're probably ending up somewhere more like 55 or 60% of what you're selling in the end. I don't begrudge them. I mean, my game wouldn't be out there if it wasn't for Steam. And the idea that, I go back far enough that I remember like going to a video game store and there's boxes and you're picking out your game. So I appreciate that, this is a way that I can distribute my game to the world. But it's not easy to get your game on Steam. Once it's up, then it's like really easy. And now I just get to sit back and watch people download it and play it and review it. But putting it up there was a little overwhelming for a week or so.
I can imagine. Yeah. No, I think you should be very proud to have a game on Steam. That's super cool. That's like, elite cred or something, I got a game on Steam. Yeah, let's go. That's cool.
It's definitely impressive for my students when I'm teaching teenagers. And, like I said, I'm older. So when I'm trying to, if you're trying to convince teenage filmmakers that you're cool, and you're like, I got a game on Steam, then suddenly it's like, what? Like, that's cool. Yeah.
It is.
Have you had
It's
any
very
consideration about publishing to other platforms or in storefronts as well, to perhaps reach a wider audience in case some people don't look for games on Steam, but perhaps Epic or the App Store or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, so we've thought about that, whether it's, the App Store or itch, which I mentioned earlier. I would be open to it. It's honestly, we're just not selling that many games, so it feels like it would be maybe a certain amount of energy to have just a handful of more sales, but maybe there's a greater audience out there that I'm missing. So I'm not opposed to it. Our game's been out now for 6 months. Maybe that's something that we should start to look at.
Yeah, that's an interesting. Had that in the back of my mind as a question. Casper beat me to it. Yeah, I mean, I don't know about the audience. Obviously, Steam does account for the vast majority of PC, Mac, Linux digital downloads. App Store is its own beast. I don't know how difficult or not it is to get on there. I was curious about things like Epic or Good Old Games, and I don't know what those requirements are either. I'm less familiar. I have all these platforms downloaded, but I primarily game on Steam as well. Itch is I always think of it as itch.io because it's itch.io.
It is,
but
yeah.
I guess it's just called itch.
It is itch.io, and I'm sure they're mad at me for just saying itch. So
okay, I wasn't sure. That sounds
I think
funny.
everyone knows them as both itch and itch.io anyway. So
yeah, that's fair. Yeah, they're really neat. I found a lot of I guess like prototypes, random demos, almost like pre-early access stuff that might later show up on Steam. I bumped up on itch and I don't know, something like Ravensfield or I don't know, some other like random shootery games. I was trying to do a video with Mr. MacRight on like top Mac shooters. It was honestly kind of hard going back to that mention of like we wish there were more games, and I ended up finding several on itch actually.
Yeah, I think what you see a lot of on itch is there's a lot of indie developers who are, coming out of college. They're going to college for game development, which you can do nowadays. And oftentimes, your junior and senior year, you have these requirements to actually like make and build games, and that's like how you graduate. It's like your thesis project. And I find a lot of those games are ending up on places like itch because there's no cost to get it up on itch. And as you would expect, there's a tremendous range of, wow, this game is terrible and full of bugs, to, wow, this game is actually kind of amazing, and how did this fly under the radar? The tricky thing is sometimes finding those games, which is what you guys do really well with your YouTube channel and your podcast, is letting people know about some of these other things that are out there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the goal. We've been discussing internally an idea of maybe a new format, because we're trying, well, we as me, trying to cram everything into one episode, for like an hour. And then we ran like an hour 45 the other week talking about all kinds of fun stuff. But it's like trying to cram like new Mac game releases or interesting, very like game specific things along with all these other topics usually ends up kind of being too big. So we may, like every other week, do a different one, or at least once a month have like a game special show, something. There's a few ideas flying around, but basically highlighting all interesting games you might have missed or flown under the radar, or worth talking about, worth checking out.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I get at least half the games I buy, I've gotten because of your YouTube channel. Like, I'm watching your reviews, and I wouldn't have heard of it otherwise. And there's so many games coming out right now. It's one of the things that shocked me is when we released our game, which was just a sort of a random Friday in January. It was the first day that we were like, it's ready. Like we'll do it this day. There were it was like 60 games came out that day on Steam.
Wow.
And it wasn't a special day. It wasn't like, it was like, 60 days were going to come out the following Monday, and another 60 were going to come out on Tuesday. And, so to get noticed in that sea of games is tricky.
It is. Definitely. It is. I help it's not my YouTube channel, just to clarify, because Mr. Mac, right? Listen, Stewie is his name. His channel I just help out sometimes, but we collaborate in any case. But a lot of sites also do this, like PC Gamer, Rock Paper Shotgun, game sites.
Yeah.
Some of them have recurring columns of 5 games you might have missed on Steam this week, and they feature some of these random or weird or odd, often indie kind of games, or just something that is something unusual, and it highlights them, gives them some link or a gameplay video. Some of them add some comments, like, oh, I played it, it's like this. And I took inspiration from that as well. I mean, sometimes, coincidentally, they're Mac games, not often, sometimes they're not, but like, the original, this is technically a relaunch of an older podcast Ted and I were a part of, from several years ago. But like one of my original goals was basically to do that, to highlight Mac gaming more, because there is more to it than people think, and there's more games out there than people think. And sometimes I've had people say, like, be shocked that some AAA game or even an indie game is like, what, that's available on Mac? I didn't even know, just because they didn't know, and they're like, oh, that's cool. So trying to highlight, put a spotlight on Mac gaming, or people who make Mac games, or games in general, is something I'm passionate about, and I like to try and do.
Quick question, and if this is too much of an aside, just tell me. Is Apple Arcade hurting AAA games coming to like Steam because now Mac is funneling gamers in that direction?
I think that's
go ahead, Casper.
Yeah, I think the audience for Apple Arcade is slightly different than the audience that would normally look at Steam games anyway. So I don't think that's necessarily that big an influence. And I think in the grand scheme of things, Apple Arcade does more good than harm.
Good.
Mostly because it's also focused a lot on iOS, where it pushes away some of the microtransaction heavy mobile games in favor of more substantial games that aren't just storefronts for buying gems or something like that.
Yeah, good.
But it is a pretty big topic that we might do separately at some point. But yeah, I think in the grand scheme of things, it's more good than harm.
Yeah, the fact that it's curated is a big deal. I have perhaps more less optimistic feelings than Casper on that. I do think Apple Arcade in general is a good thing. But at the same time, I don't think the Mac App Store specifically, because not the App Store, the Mac App Store, the MAS, I don't think that's a good thing for gaming. And that reason is because of their restrictions to release a game on the Mac App Store. It can't, there can't be like third-party calls or APIs. And I mean, this is a bit of a personal bias because Aspire Media way back in 2013, September, released Call of Duty Black Ops 1. And they stripped out a ton of major features from the game to put it on the App Store. So I was bitter and salty that a game, I was expecting to have these features in, a bunch of them got cut because they had, they wanted to get it on the App Store. So it's this two-edged sword of, and I've heard from Aspire and Feral, and must be true for others, the App Store actually gave them a ton of new sales. Because suddenly on every Mac was shipping the App Store. You just click in there, it's boom, and things are featured and spotlighted, and here's Tomb Raider, and here's Civilization, or here's this indie game. So I think in many ways it's helped Mac gaming exposure in a big way, and I give them a lot of props for that. That's terrific. It would be like as if Steam came installed on every Mac as well, for example, or every PC, or whatever, or Epic did, or any, pick your platform. But like that's like a broader overview of that. Your specific question of like, is it hurting AAA games coming to the Mac? I don't think so necessarily. I mean, it could be because some of these games, mostly games that require multiplayer or have built-in voice chat or something like a what do you call it, photo mode, theater mode, anything like that, probably can't be on the App Store. Or if it is on the App Store, it'd have to be stripped of those features. That would be an issue. So, Mac gaming is in an interesting place, or a multiplayer specific game, maybe a co-op heavy game like Borderlands, very co-op heavy game. So not like multiplayer PvP, player versus player, but if you have Borderlands on the App Store, you can only play with other people who own it on the App Store.
Oh.
For example. Same for Civilization. You have Civ 5 in the App Store, you can only play with other people on the App Store.
Kind of caveat to that. If you play
ahead.
local area multiplayer, you can play with PC users on Steam as well.
Oh,
It
very
just doesn't work
interesting.
online, but you can do local area.
So just travel around and connect with people locally. That is I like that tidbit. So it's this weird thing of, it's a double-edged sword. It's helping a ton, and it's given a lot of exposure, a lot of sales, kept a lot of these companies going. But it also, in some cases, is restrictive. In the long run, it's probably more harm than good. I also agree with that sentiment. I'm a little maybe fired up about it because some of my favorite games have been like, put in the walled garden of Apple. But I love Apple. I'm very passionate about it. I love Macs. I prefer them for all my gaming. But I would probably never recommend anyone go to the App Store to buy a game unless it's single player, basically. But even then, it's like, what kind of, and this kind of goes back to a little bit of what kind of gamer are you? We had an episode, I think it was episode 2. What are you looking for? Are you looking for a little turn-based zombie indie title? Well, then don't get bit. I guess there's just not too many. The 32-bit apocalypse, as we call it, knocked out some things like Left 4 Dead, which was like the go-to like Mac zombie shooter, like faster pace thing. It also took out this fun little indie game called what was it called? Hell something. Not Hell Let Loose. That's a World War II shooter. No More Room in Hell. That's what it was called. Yeah. It was a really cool, free-to-play, like zombie co-op game, more methodical and slow, survival-y, heavy, not like fast-paced rush, Left 4 Dead. But so we kind of lost some of our zombie games there. But what kind of experience are you looking for? So the average Mac gamer isn't looking necessarily, so it seems anyway, for these kind of like big AAA experiences or flocking to XCOMs or Tomb Raiders or what have you. A lot of them seem cool with Apple Arcade or just what's available on Steam as is or whatever. But that's really a matter of, I think, of exposure and a matter of knowledge. It's just a knowledge gap, in my opinion.
Right,
Mr.
but I think
McRae.
that's actually one of the strengths of the App Store on the Mac, because Steam is, while it does support Mac and Mac games, there's a lot on Steam that's not available on Mac. So if you click the Store button, you'll see a lot of stuff you can't just play on your Mac. But if you open the Mac App Store and you click on the Games tab, everything you see is on the Mac. And Apple will highlight a lot of the games that are available on Mac. And that way, if there is a big AAA release on the Mac and it's put on the App Store, it'll be highlighted. And they'll also highlight a lot of indie titles because of the smaller catalog of games. There'll be more exposure for each one of them.
Yeah, they do the like editor picks of the month or week even, and often there's an indie game in there or a game of some kind. And occasionally they even do features, like little write-ups on it. So overall it's definitely cool. And Steam can be very messy. There's so many sub-features and layers to Steam, whether it's like the marketplace or workshops or cards or inventory items. It also has like, I don't know, groups, and there's just all these. It used to have a Steam Greenlight, which is how you would have had to get on Steam, I guess, previously. I guess that's canned now. I used to spend time in there upvoting games. So there's this whole like Steam ecosystem that exists well beyond just the gaming. So for like ease of use, absolutely, App Store is way better in that case, or possibly even something like Epic, or Good Old Games or something, perhaps for like UI reasons. Yeah, but is there merit to getting your game on more platforms? Could be. I mean, that's up to you guys. May get you some more sales. I mean, I don't know, if you have to run around filling out days of paperwork and paying fees to get on stores, maybe not. But it's I think if we were to go back to your original question about the App Store and funneling games, AAA games, I feel the limitation is in the App Store. The limitation's the Mac hardware and Mac support, basically. That's the real limitation. And we're seeing that change not only from the 32-bit to 64-bit exclusive, but with the Apple transitioning to Silicon. That's really the crux of the matter. Not to mention COVID happening, teams are slowed down and all this stuff. We saw a drastic decrease in game releases from the big people in the Mac space, like Feral and Aspire. They were releasing a bunch of stuff into 2019, and then at the end of it, like a hard cutoff. We got like one thing. Not even from Aspire, but from Feral in like the last year and a half. So that's going on too. But really it's the hardware. But the M1 is doing really cool things. The Apple Silicon M1 chip is doing really, really cool things. And we're very excited about it around here in the team. And I think people should be in general. And we're going to have a fellow on here named Andrew in a couple weeks, who runs a YouTube channel. And he's created a wiki, Apple Gaming Wiki as well. And he's all about the M1. He's like an M1 fanatic, and exploring what it can do and the kind of games it can run, often even non-natively through like crossover parallels. So he's like a bit of an expert, I think. So we're going to have him on here in a few weeks to talk more about it, and that will also be very, very relevant to this conversation. It's a bit of a tangent, but like the future of Mac gaming, it's a very interesting thing. In some cases, it's a little bit of a nebulous thing. I'm an optimist. It's easy, I think, to say a lot of bad things about it right now, but transitions are often awkward and bumpy, and we're in a transition period. So we got to wait till the dust settles and, see where it picks up.
Sure.
That's where I feel. That's where I feel it is. Yeah.
Cool.
Any other thoughts, questions, or comments from Casper or Ted? I'll say. Oh, I wanted to ask you just before we let you go. You've mentioned creating films and teaching students and stuff. You want to talk about that for a minute or two, or plug yourself or anything?
I don't want to. I know this is all about gaming, so I don't want to digress too much. I'm a filmmaker. But my wife and I own a film school called New Jersey Film School, and if you're in New Jersey and you're looking to learn filmmaking, or you just want to stop by and talk about my game in person, you can go to njfilmschool.com, and you can find me there.
Oh, that's really cool. That's awesome. Very. I like how family orientated everything you do is.
It's 90% good and 10% we're going to kill each other, but mostly good.
That's fantastic. Well, I'm over here in Vermont. I'm fairly close. Maybe I'll be able to swing by one day. Fantastic. And of course, again, we were here talking about Don't Get Bit, built by Chris. Type in Don't Get Bit on Google or Steam. It'll come up. Go check it out. Yeah, you can. It's cool. It's worth having a peek if it sounds like your kind of game. And if it isn't, well, then it isn't. But yeah, definitely check it out. Oh, sorry. I did have one final question.
Yeah.
And maybe you can't answer it. But do you have like any intent or inkling at all to make another game, or was that kind of a one-off product of the the COVID thing, basically that environment?
Yeah, my wife would say I do not, because I spent, this is like, in 10 months I probably spent about 1,000 hours working on the game. So it's pretty all-consuming, but all-consuming in a fun way. I can definitely imagine doing another game someday. And because there's, I don't know, I'm a man, so I probably shouldn't say this, but I think it's maybe like childbirth, where like you very quickly forget about the pain that you went through, and then you just have this beautiful baby that you love, right? And so there was a lot of pain along the way in making the game, but now there's this game that I love, and I made it, and other people are enjoying it, and so there's part of me that would like to do it again someday. And if I do, it'll definitely be a Mac and PC game going forward.
Ooh,
Yeah,
fantastic.
Good to hear.
Well,
Nice.
yeah, no, thank you so much, Chris. It was very informative, very interesting to hear your experiences and everything about that. Really appreciate you sharing it and taking the time to come and talk with us. It'll be a lot of fun.
Well, thank you for
I
having
hope
me. This
for
was a real
listeners.
pleasure. I think most people who make games are probably super happy to talk about what it was like making them. You're just the first people to ask, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, more people
Nice.
should ask. You're very interesting. Your story's very interesting. Your family's amazing. The game's really cool. And yeah, really a lot of respect for what you do, and yeah, the work you've put in to contribute to gaming and Mac gaming.
Appreciate it. Thank you so
fantastic.
much, guys.
Yeah. Cheers. Thank you very
Yeah.
much. A big thank you to Kevin McLeod for the intro and outro music. Be sure to check out his library on the web. You can find more episodes of our show on our website, macgamecast.com, or in all major podcast directories. If you enjoy the show, please consider commenting, following, or sharing. Thanks again for listening, and see you next time.